Welcome, Professor Sikan.
Welcome. Thanks, Irfa.
Bagi penyatuan laut Indonesia. Kita simak ceritanya yuk teman-teman. Nama lengkap Djuanda Kartawijaya adalah Insinyur Raden Haji Djuanda Kartawijaya. Ia lahir di Tasikmalaya, Jawa Barat, tanggal 14 Januari 1911. Setelah Indonesia merdeka, Djuanda menjabat sejumlah posisi penting di pemerintahan, mulai dari Menteri Perhubungan, Menteri Pekerjaan Umum, Menteri Pertahanan, Menteri Keuangan, hingga Perdana Menteri pada tahun 1957. Saat menjabat Perdana Menteri inilah Djuanda merintis penyatuan laut Indonesia. Sebelum tahun 1957, batas wilayah laut Indonesia masih diatur oleh Ordonansi Hindia Belanda 1939. Dalam aturan tersebut, pulau-pulau di wilayah Nusantara dipisahkan oleh laut dan setiap pulau hanya berhak atas 3 mil wilayah perairan yang diukur dari garis pantai. Kapal-kapal asing pun bebas berkeliaran di antara pulau-pulau dan mengancam kedaulatan wilayah Indonesia. Karena itu, tanggal 13 Desember 1957, Kabinet Karya di bawah pimpinan Perdana Menteri Djuanda mengeluarkan pertanyaan yang dikenal sebagai Deklarasi Djuanda. Deklarasi ini menyatakan Laut Indonesia adalah termasuk laut sekitar, di antaranya dan di dalam Kepulauan Indonesia menjadi satu kesatuan wilayah Republik Indonesia. Awalnya, deklarasi Djuanda ditentang oleh hampir seluruh negara di dunia. Tapi pemerintah Indonesia tidak menyerah. Selama bertahun-tahun, Indonesia memperjuangkan konsep negara kepulauan yang ada dalam deklarasi Djuanda agar diterima masyarakat internasional. Perjuangan panjang itu pun akhirnya mencapai keberhasilan saat isi deklarasi Djuanda diakui dan ditetapkan oleh Konvensi Hukum Laut PBB ketiga tanggal 10 Desember 1982. Untuk terus menghidupkan semangat deklarasi Djuanda, pada tahun 2001 tanggal 13 Desember ditetapkan sebagai Hari Nusantara. Djuanda dianugerahi gelar pahlawan tahun 1963. Untuk mengenang jasa-jasanya, namanya diabadikan sebagai nama Taman Hutan Raya Djuanda di Bandung dan Bandara Djuanda di Surabaya.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our CSGS webinar. My name is Demas Novarian and I will be the master of ceremony for this event. First of all, we would like to welcome all of our honorable speakers that have made their time to come to this webinar. We are very proud to have such amazing speakers to be able to come to this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar is one of the product of Cakra Studi Global Strategies of our Center of Strategic and Global Studies, a global and strategic studies think tank under Department of International Relations, Universitas Airlangga, Indonesia. From time to time, CSGS has held a lot of dissemination series, and this time, this webinar, we will talk about beyond Indonesia's Global Maritime Fulcrum, prospect and challenges. This theme became a very important theme in the international relations discourse in Indonesia due to the fact that Indonesia has in many times claimed itself as a maritime state. Therefore, the ideas of global maritime fulcrum that exist in the administration of Joko Widodo has become an important discussion among social science scholars. Before we continue to the main event of our webinar, I would like to welcome Dr. Phil Siti Rohmawati Susanto as the head of Department of International Relations, Universitas Erlangga, to give us a welcoming remarks. To Ms. Siti Rohmawati Susanto, time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you, Demas. I think I have problem in viewing my camera. I cannot. Yes, okay, great. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished speakers, colleagues, students, and all participants. First of all, I would like to welcome and thank all of you for being here in the midst of crisis like no other to attend our webinar series with the title Beyond Indonesia's Global Maritime Fulcrum, Prospect and Challenges. This event is organized by International Relations Department, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Erlangga, in collaborations with the Center for Strategic and Global Studies, CSGS, Universitas Erlangga. And in particular, I would like to thank all of our outstanding speaker for this evening webinar. Professor Pankaj Jha from Jindal Global University, India, and Professor Srikan Kondapali, who would like to fulfill our invitations to attend our webinar today, and Bapak Ibrahim Rohman, PhD from Samudra Indonesia, Jakarta, Mas Joko Susanto, MSc from International Relations Department, Universitas Erlangga. And I would like also to thank our webinar organizer, Mbak Irfa Puspitasari, MA, and Agastya Wardana, and also Demas for arranging this such a productive event. Despite of today's uncertain situations, I'm very happy that our department and CSGS are able to conduct this important webinar, especially to commemorate the Djuanda Declarations, which was promulgated in December 13, 1957. Indeed, Djuanda Declarations is very meaningful for Indonesia. It is considered as a tremendous great success for this country because it has integrated the whole territory of Indonesia, including island and water, to establish what we know today as the Unitary Republic of Indonesia, just like the video we just watched previous time ago. Indonesia as an archipelagic country, which 2/3 of its territory comprising of water, connect more than 13,000 islands nationwide. The proclamations of independence of Indonesia on 17 August 1945 did not automatically unite its whole territory. According to international law of the sea at that time, the coastal territory had only a claim towards water national jurisdictions for only 3 miles. In this regard, Indonesia had a big problem to gain full sovereignty as an archipelagic state. Therefore, in the middle of struggle to include the Papua into Indonesia, Prime Minister Djuanda Kartawijaya took an initiative to unravel the issues. On December 13, 1957, he proposed an unilateral official declarations of Indonesian territorial waters for 12 miles from the sea baseline of outer boundary points. Fortunately, this Djuanda initiative has influenced the establishment of the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea, which we know as the UNCLOS in 1982, that recognized the archipelagic state principle as claimed by Indonesia. So without further ado, on behalf of Department of International Relations, Universitas Erlangga and Center for Strategic and Global Studies, I officially open the webinar, and I wish all of you to have very fruitful and enlightening discussions during the sessions. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you, Demas. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Filsiti Rohmawati Susanto, as the head of Department of International Relations, Universitas Erlangga. Ladies and gentlemen, in this CSGS webinar, we have been blessed to be able to invite 3 amazing speakers for this webinar, and it is my honor to welcome them to this webinar. The first one is, we would like to welcome Professor Pankaj Jha as the Associate Dean of Research for Jindal School of International Studies of OP Jindal Global University in India. Welcome, Professor Pankaj Jha. Thank you very much for being here. The second one, we have Mr. Ibrahim K. Rohman, PhD, from Samudra Indonesia Research Initiative of ORSIRI. Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim, for being here. And the third one, we will later have Mr. Joko Susanto, MSc, which is a lecturer of international relations in Universitas Erlangga. We hope that Mr. Joko Susanto will be able to join us later. And for this webinar, I would like to have the honor to invite Ms. Irfa Puspitasari, MA. She is a researcher at Cakra Studi Global Strategies and lecturer at Department of International Relations, Universitas Erlangga, to moderate this webinar. For Mbak Irfa, time and place is yours.
Okay, thank you, Demas. Hello, everyone. Welcome to... Oh, what's happened? The voice is bouncing. Okay.
It is very clear from my end.
I don't know what's... Okay. But I don't know what happened, but I hear it's bouncing from my... in here.
Echoing.
Okay. Okay.
Echoing.
Bouncing.
Okay.
Yes, echoing.
Okay. Just pull your plug and put it again. Your headphone plug.
Okay. I think is it clear right now?
Slightly louder.
Okay, so it's fine. Then hello, welcome everyone. Webinars. Yes. I will introduce you again with the speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Ibrahim Khalilur Rahman, PhD from Samudra Indonesia Research Initiative, SIRI. Ibrahim Khalilur Rahman, or Mas Ibra, is head of economic research at Samudra Indonesia, one of the oldest shipyards, and he the company's think tank. He is responsible to prepare strategies to facilitate competitiveness, efficiency, and resource allocation with robust research and evidence-based analysis conducted at micro, industry, and macro levels. Previously, he was a research fellow at the United Nations University, operating unit on policy-driven electronic governance. He was assigned to assess the role of electronic governance on country competitiveness. Prior to joining UNU, he was a research fellow at GRC, Directorate Growth and Innovation, European Commissions. He was in charge on the projects analyzing the competitiveness of the EU's ICT sectors on their research and And the project served as an input for the Europe Digital Progress Reports. Dr. Ibrahim also teaches digital economic at the undergrad programs at the Faculty of Economic and Business, University of Indonesia. And fortunately, he is also my senior in high school, so we able to invite. And our second and distinguished speaker, Professor Pangkaja, is an Associate Dean Research in Jindal School of International Affairs, Jindal Global University. Dr. Pangkaja is professor in Jindal University and director of Center for Security Studies. He is executive of a research-oriented think tank known as JASCUP, and he worked with Indian Council of World Affairs for more than 2 years as a deputy director with National Security Council Secretariat, and was closely associated with national security apparatus in India. Between 2005 and 2012, he worked as associate fellow with ITSA. At this time, he hit me when I was doing an intern, and he gave me valuable guidance, supervisions in writing. He gave me chance to write with ITSA. And I think through this sharing experience, we able to invite him here. And then he also has been member of high-level delegations to UK, Israel, and other countries. Has been visiting fellow with Center of International Security Studies, Sydney University, and then visiting fellow in Institute for South Asian Studies, Singapore. Work with Indian Council of World Affairs. He also given lectures and participate in high-level dialogues in Germany, Belgium, Israel, China, New Zealand, and Australia. So this insight will give us valuable input for us on rethinking critically about Indonesia Global Maritime Fulcrum. And Mas Chanto is lectures in International Relations Department, Universitas Airlangga. He's a very distinguished person, and lecturer. He is part of. He is part of the movement to with also with his network. And then after he succeed with all of us in Reformation, he contribute to this nation with the alliance with the famous national newspaper through Institute of Autonomy, therefore strengthening the decentralization process. He keep contributing through national awakening and democracy through webinar. Through seminar, workshops, forums, via Chokro Aminoto lectures, and then he also keeps strengthening the international relations perspective through various think tanks, and currently he is active being executive director for emerging Indonesia's projects. And now we will have the floor for Mas Ibra to deliver his insight and his complete package, digital economy and e-governance. And then he will give us, he will provide us with the bridge through practitioners in the or in the industry sectors, which because he also giving insight here through the lens of from Samudra Indonesia. So Mas Ibra, Dr. Ibra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mbak Irfa, Ibu Siti, college from UNER, Universitas Airlangga. It is such pleasure for me to be here. I'm also, and I was given first chance. So what I'm going to talk today is about 10 anecdotal facts, what we know and we don't know about the maritime and shipping industry. What we have learned today, usually we are talking about the, the hype and the overwhelming has been initiated by Djuanda more than 60 years back, should be acknowledged as a springboard and starting point for us to better understand what's going on and to set a platform for us to develop our maritime shipping industry better, knowing that we are, comprising a lot of islands and connected by ocean. So I'm going to talk about the maritime and shipping industry, and allow me to very shortly introduce what Samudra Indonesia is and what type of work we are currently working on. Maybe most of you, when you go through subways and toll roads across Indonesia, maybe you can see container transportation is one of our main jobs in connecting Indonesia. We actually offer integrated logistics services. We are servicing a container and then dry bulk for coal and then tanker. We are also operating ports. We are also operating land transport, warehousing, cold storage, and the whole ecosystem. We have been operating in about 57 international networks, including some cities in India, in Mumbai, Nhava Sheva, Calcutta, Kandla, Madras, New Delhi, some cities as well in South Asia. And of course, we are present in 65 work sites in Indonesia, from the westmost point in Aceh and eastmost point in Papua. So we are pretty much, hopefully we are able to portray what's going on in the logistic and maritime industry from both global view and local and regional views. So the first point will be among 10 questions that we're going to answer. Just to reflect upon the spirit which has been initiated by Djuanda, so that we understand where are we now in the global landscape of maritime industry, global maritime industry. First question will be, are we really that strong in the maritime industry? The first credo that we have to understand is that as a shipping or maritime sector, which is, I'm talking about shipping at this occasion, maritime or shipping industry is the middleman in the process of connecting and bringing cargo from one point to another point. So that we have to understand that the ships follow the trade. So as long as there are commodities, then the ship will bring the commodities from one point to another, be it in local, in domestic trade, and as well as international trade. So this is the first credo, that ships cannot be seen in isolation. The maritime sector, maritime transportation cannot be seen in isolation because we're just the middleman. So as much as the manufacturing industry growing, then the shipping sector will also grow as the support for manufacturing. But the fact is that maybe beyond of what most people think, Indonesia has been witnessing quite flattened growth of throughputs, over decades. So, for instance, compared with Vietnam was just 1/3 of Indonesia 10 years back, and currently there are about 40% higher in terms of the throughput, in terms of the capacity and the volume of cargo. Of course, we cannot compare ourselves with Singapore, with Malaysia, because they are playing as the transshipment hub. So everything going out from ASEAN region should go through Singapore or Malaysia. Similarly, when Mbak Irfa or Ibu Siti are traveling to Europe, you have to go through, in most cases, you have to stop in Singapore to, change the flight, or Kuala Lumpur change the flight onto the final destination. And in this case, Singapore is quite, extremium, outlier in the analysis. But if we compare to other regions, we can see that the growth of Indonesian cargo is much smaller than those of Asian ports such as Vietnam and Thailand. So how can shipping industry grow if the commodity is limited? We only have like 14 million box. Over the years we only have 14 million compared to Malaysia, compared to Singapore 35, 37, and to others. So from the point here that it will be challenged. It will be challenged as ship always follow the trade. So as if manufacturing industry is not supporting, if the gap between Java and out of Java is still happening, with the imbalanced cargo, whenever we are going out from Java to Sumatra to Kalimantan, we can bring 100% cargo or 80%, to say the least. But then on return, we can only bring 20%, 30% because of the inequality of manufacturing in the manufacturing policy, manufacturing sector in Java and out of Java. So and that will be the first topic that, despite that we have really good, for those of you learning economics, sea transportation has been contributing a lot for the economy, entailing higher multiplier, but then we receive less with in the sense of amount of credit and stuff. So there is imbalance between what we have contributed and we have received from the economy. Second one, what should be the motivation to develop our shipping industry? What will be the first motivation, the first layer motivation? For us, the first layer motivation is the fact that talking about current account deficit, talking about the external balance, we have been learning about the fact Indonesia is struggling to keep the current account deficit surplus, so that it will stimulate the stability in the exchange rate, stability in trade, stability in demand and supply of currencies. But little did we know that actually the ability to transport our own cargo is contributing hugely to the stability of the current account deficit. So about 25% of current account deficits in Indonesia is attributed to transportation. So Pak Djuanda must be so sad knowing that the spirit of connecting Indonesia has not yet been really reflected on the ability to transport, to be a good transporter of our own cargo. So the export is there, the commodities are there, coal are there, nickel are there, you name it, our commodities, textile are there, but we don't have enough capacity to bring out of the country. So having said that, in let's say 100% of current account deficit, so the deficit between our export and import, 25% is attributed to our inability to bring our own cargo. So it's, to me, it's very contradictory, knowing that Indonesia is maritime, is archipelago, but we are not able to bring our own cargo. And that Mbak Irfa has mentioned, the ministry has introduced beyond cabotage policy, so that if we want to export CPO, importation of rice, coal, we have to use our own shipping. But then the problem is that the capacity of our own vessel is very limited. Yeah. So we have like almost 500 million coal exportations in 2019, but the number of reliable, or the number of the dry bulk vessel in Indonesia is just less than 300. Can you imagine 300 vessel responsible for 500 million, yeah, exportation of coal? Of course, we cannot, we cannot cope with the demand, and we cannot cope with the demand, and the consequently is that we always depend on foreign vessel to bring our export out of the country. So it is quite saddening. Yeah, it's quite saddening that we have the commodities, but we are not able to bring them out. And then the third issues would be that knowing that we are lacking of the infrastructure, with the shipping infrastructure. When talking about transportation, most attention given by government is about port. Yeah, about port, developing port here, developing port there, developing new Patimban port or whatever port the government is planning to build. But then port without ship is not possible. Port without ship will only be a sunk cost, would be inefficient infrastructure expenses, and that is something very hard to understand. That we need decent, strong, and reliable shipping sector. But that government is always talking about port, about modernization of port, without really integrating the policy with the availability of shipping. And that will be a bit too late, yeah, if we later realize. Why? Because our capacity as domestic carrier is very limited. Maybe India is also similar to Indonesia. We have cabotage, yes, that in domestic routes, only those of Indonesian flag can operate, except there are some exceptions. For instance, for big tanker, which we don't have any vessel, yeah, 125,000, for instance, that's always BP vessel, for instance, or others foreign vessel. But if you look into this data, that the new vessel development currently prepared in the shipyard is about 9,000, 12,000, and the capacity of domestic vessels about 2,000, 3,000. So we will be expecting the fight between David and Goliath in the near future if we don't pay attention, that the whole ecosystem of the shipping industry, maritime industry, should be developed in balanced way. Not only port, but also shipping. We don't have enough, we don't have very strong shipping industry. And then, which is very interesting, is that when government says we have to modernize Tanjung Priok, we have to modernize Patimban, we have to modernize Batang in Central Java, which is currently planning yet another port in North Java area. What we don't realize is that the better your port is, the less competitive your domestic vessel will be. Why? Because when you have really deep port, modern port, yeah, the big vessel will come in. You name it, Costco, and then CMA, CGM, Mars Line. Those giants will not join in if we have limited port, because they feel like it's not economy of scale if we come into Surabaya or Jakarta with limited depth of water. But then now with modernization, all of a sudden they can jump into Jakarta, leaving small vessel of Indonesian, bring nothing, because then we used to be, catering them as feeder services. But then when we are more modern, the port are becoming more modern, then those big ships will jump into Jakarta, 15,000, 12,000. Even in Singapore, we have 23,000. So that the cost, the economic cost of loading and unloading will be very cheap for them, as they are so gigantic. It's just like you have Airbus A380 compared to, let's say, Bombardier. It's uncomparable. But that with that capacity will be less competitive with big vessels operating in the region. It's already happening in Thailand, in Vietnam. Big vessels are already coming in so that the share, the proportion, and the contribution of smaller regional vessels is becoming more limited. So that's something, if you don't understand if government don't understand the real industry business, the vertical integration and horizontal integration between port and shipping, we'll be so happy. Okay, Indonesia has really good port, but what we don't realize, when we have good port, then big vessel will come in, limiting the ability of domestic vessel to compete with them. Okay, so that having said that, what will be the challenge with the current global market? The current global market is so unique that there are only 3 alliances. So same at in the airlines, we only have 3 big alliances in the world. So if you have randomly, if you are facing big vessel in Laut Jawa or wherever you are facing them, either they are part of the alliance, Ocean Alliance, or the alliance, or 2M. So they are all, member of this. And if you are learning economics, of course, with this type of oligopoly, price maker by them, regional carrier will be depending on what they decide, with the tit for tat policy. Yeah, it's just like between KFC, McDonald's, and Burger King. So typical industry where only limited players are dominating the market, typical oligopoly, so that it's just comparing big elephants, 3 elephants and 1 rabbit, for instance. So small operators, rabbit or ants probably, so that we can only rely on what's going on between these 3 alliances. So business, global shipping industry as well is very fluctuating, so that if you are not super big, it's very difficult to cope with the fluctuations of the industry, and such a way that those players are those players are more into collusion, building a certain block of oligopoly rather than competing individually. So I'm talking about uncertainties in shipping, but what is it about really? Yeah, when we're talking about uncertainties, then you will find something you will not find anywhere else in the shipping, which is the reason why Indonesian player face it or see it as real problem. Yeah, why? First, because we have fluctuating in the price of vessels. So for instance here, when you have this data, what can you conclude? New vessel bought in 2014 are more expensive than the same new vessel in 2016. It means that if you don't have enough capacity, like if you are not, which is operating 600 vessels, it is a big blow for you to speculate buying the vessel in 2014, yeah, just to witness that the price will be dropped 2 years after. And that is the reason there is no single regional carrier, be it in India, in Indonesia, in Singapore, in ASEAN, that can compete with the global players. Why? Because the price of vessel is very fluctuating, and the limited source of financial sources. Yeah, it's not like you are, Costco or Marsline, who operating a lot of vessels. Yeah, in our capacity, in our set, for instance, we are probably only 100 or 70, 100. So it is difficult to have justifiable business model when the price is fluctuated. The price in 2014 was driven by China boom, and then China is moderated, followed by the declining in price. And those ups and downs, the roller coaster price is really difficult for regional carriers who doesn't have enough capacity of financing revenue, financing sources. And what is the unfairness here? The unfairness is that Asia is the global source of trade, yeah, including Indonesia. So if you check the trade intra-Asian countries like India and China and ASEAN, for instance, we are contributing to about 70% of total global trade. Yet all standardization is set by European countries or Northern America. So for instance, starting the 1st January 2020, all players have to use this low sulfur, yeah, 0.5 sulfur, which is high cost for us, which is high cost for those regional carriers operating older vessels. Yeah, but IMO just close the eyes. You cope with the regulation or you quit the industry. So this is not only in shipping. I think in all standardizations, they're always set by more advanced countries, yeah, leaving us little possibilities to work on. Like, okay, you can use your older vessel, but you have to buy the scrubber, which costs you about 2 million per vessel, and you have to buy the scrubber from any of European countries. So while they are contributing less than 30%, they're kind of, what Djuanda maybe also so angry back then is the monopoly of ideas, monopoly of decision making, monopoly of setting the target, whatever. So that's the case of the Asia, and particularly Indonesia, where we are facing with the giant of policy making process. Now we are coming to more local level now. How can one explain the logistic chain in Indonesia? Most of the discussion when we are talking about logistic, we'll compare Indonesia with Singapore, with Malaysia, with Thailand, with India, for instance. The logistic cost in Indonesia is still 23% of GDP. So assume you have 100%, 100 GDP, 100 rupiahs, $100, then 23% is attributable to the logistic cost. How can we explain this? Because we cannot actually compare Indonesia with other countries due to the necessity to load and unload many times. It is simply not possible. You have to compare Indonesia with Europe, for instance, which has like about 12%, 30%, 13% logistic cost, because in Europe, for instance, when you load the cargo in Southern Europe, let's say in Lisbon to Luxembourg, which is the same distance as from Jakarta to Balikpapan, you just need one type of transportation. Subway, put the container, and that's all. Indonesia will be facing a lot of double charging. You have double tracking, you have double THC, terminal handling charge, you have doubling loading and unloading LOLO. And that's it's just natural blessing. In a way, this is what it is. We are islands country. We cannot avoid that. If we bring something from Jakarta to Papua, we'll face a lot of duplication of costs. Yeah, and that is the reason why it is important to really identify which cost component that can really minimize, and not only the ocean freight, not only the costs associated with the vessel operations, but also the efficiency at port, efficiency at logistic in tracking, efficiency in warehousing, efficiency in crane productivity, and stuff. So Indonesia is really complex, and ocean freight, yeah, the efficiency in sea transportations is one among the whole components that should be developed all together. So this is this. And that's the reason in some part of Indonesia, the price is still very expensive. When you send cargo, one box of container from Jakarta to China in normal period, yeah, exclude the COVID period like today's, you will be, maybe you will be spending about $60 per one box. Whereas if you send your container from Jakarta to Papua, it costs you about 15 million, so about 1,500. So the inefficiency of comparing Indonesia and in regional cost structure make it very difficult to achieve decent and equitable development, as the transportation is still very expensive. Yeah, we have to pay like 15 times more expensive than those of Jakarta, Singapore, Jakarta, Hong Kong, Jakarta, China. And that's the reason as well, between the chicken and egg problem, the manufacturing is not developed yet in East Java, and as well the transportation is very expensive. What else? So how to improve? It's not easy. Yeah, we are as developing countries, most of our export is based on FOB, meaning that we are only supplying goods in front of our storage, and then everything will be enjoyed by foreign operators. be it the tracking, be it sea freight and stuff. So changing from FOB to CIF might, increase the capacity of domestic carriers so that the value added will be more enjoyed by domestic players. It is a long way off the goal, but then if we are not planning early on, actually this issue has been part of discussion since 15 years back, but nothing is really happening. But without any clear structure on reforms, it will be even more difficult for us to catch up with other countries. Yeah, and again, remembering that 25% of current core deficit is logistic cost. Now I'm talking about what's going on now in really 2 days. So if you see the news, yeah, it is part of problem now that Indonesian exporters are finding difficulties to find the cargo, to find the vessel. So what's really happening after COVID? The after COVID period is just the other way around of the normal period. The normal period is ships follow the trade. So trade will be the first in the chain of the process. As long as there is trade, there will be ship. But now in the COVID period, trade follows the ship, just the other way around. So the most important thing is the shipping industry, not the commodities. The commodities should follow what's going on in the shipping industry. Like for instance, we have been contacted by exporters in Surabaya. We have to export to India, but the slot to India has been shrinkage due to COVID since 3 months back. Yeah, it's not possible to send goods to India because it's just full capacity. And the price has been increasing like 3 times, 4 times. And imagine Indonesian exporters who export low value added of product like woods or salt or, simple thing. And they have to, witness a 3 times increase in freight rate. It's very unfavorable for countries who are only able to produce low quality of product or low value added of product. And this is the problem. I don't know if you understand economics, but the easiest way would be that we have the demand and supply problem here. First of all, there's a drop in capacity of global economy. And then unfortunately, the shipping industry is very smart. They are not so dumb as we wish. They are so smart that they just turn around the possibility that they were facing bankrupt. They just twisted and they become the champion in the crisis. What they were doing, yeah, they introduced what is called as the blank sailing program, which means that they just simply reduce the capacity of operation. So whereas while the cargo is declining all the time, they responded by, okay, the cargo can be declining, but we can also, reduce our operation. They reduce the operation, so the supply shrinkage up, so that you will face like the freight rate to India from Indonesia usually costs like 600, now about 2,000. So take it or you leave it. And consequently, if you see what's going on with the shipping operator, almost all of them, the bigger one, the giant one, they got a lot of profit. They got a lot of profit despite the COVID period because of the blank selling program. They just simply reduce the supply so that the exporters will be forced to pay 3 times, 4 times of the normal price. So how can I say that the blank selling program? So almost all export from Indonesia is going through Singapore, and the number of ships has been massively declining since April 2020, so that they can enjoy higher price. If you have supply reductions, then consequently the price will be increasing. Yeah, and this is the view that blank selling has been hurting a lot for countries like Indonesia. Guys, you can check your neighbors or your friends working in exportation of commodities. It is the hardest ever period that you have the commodities ready, but there is nothing can bring you the commodities from Indonesia to the rest of the world. And this is the proof that the freight rate has been increasing from 800 to 1,800, 3 times or 2 times at least, depending on the routes. It will hurt a lot for countries like Indonesia. And what is happening now is decoupled those aspects.
Mas Ibra, the time is up.
Oh yeah, okay. Then I will stop here. With the limited option for the government to mitigate. So that's all from me, and I'll back to moderators. Thank you.
It's a very insightful and very eye-opening information, very valuable input from Mas Ibra, and we can hear his insight again and again through YouTube. So you can replay, you can hear from bit.ly/CSGS Maritime Fulcrum, and then we will have. Now our speaker from Professor Pankaj. I think he will deliver his critical perspective from as a strategic thinkers, as a scholars who works research on international security. And so Professor Pankaj, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irfa. Thank you, Professor Siti and the Institute for bringing me on this critical issue. Now, when I looked into the topic that beyond Indonesia's global maritime fulcrum, I said that when you look into this whole Indian Ocean and how Indonesia wants to place itself because of this initiative, which is known as Global Maritime Fulcrum, where can we really connect? Where can India and Indonesia connect in this larger geopolitical strategy and the game per se as such? Now, if you look into this Global Maritime Fulcrum, which is critical for understanding Indonesia's position in the larger Indo-Pacific and how it places its critical importance in the emerging sea lanes of communication. And as my earlier speaker, Dr. Ibrahim himself says, that how this port network and also in terms of reducing the freight cost will do a lot good for Indonesia. So this global maritime fulcrum, as far as I see it, it was basically an approach adopted by Indonesia to connect the two oceans, Indian and Pacific, into the larger geopolitical geometry. So when you look into this global maritime fulcrum and when you look into what's beyond, and I strongly believe that there are 7 pillars on which this global maritime fulcrum rests. And if you replicate and if you look into global maritime fulcrum and try to superimpose India's vision with regard to Indo-Pacific Ocean initiative, you will be really surprised that they synergize so much. While you look into the 7 pillars, which has been outlined under the Global Maritime Fulcrum, which include maritime and human resources, maritime defense, security, enforcement of law and safety at sea, maritime governance, maritime economy and infrastructure, maritime spatial management, and environmental protection, along with developing maritime culture and diplomacy. This is basically seen as the 7 pillars of Indonesia. Now let's draw your attention to what has been really talked about by Prime Minister Modi, that how ASEAN and India's Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative work in tandem. Now, interestingly, while we talk about Global Maritime Fulcrum, the India-Pacific Ocean Initiative also rests on 7 major pillars, and which includes maritime security, maritime ecology, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, disaster risk reduction and management, and science and technology and academic cooperation, and trade connectivity and maritime security transport. Now, many of these things which have been outlined by Indonesia GMF, Global Maritime Fulcrum, is also replicated in India's Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. But what exactly is the critical difference? While it is true that Indonesia looks into it from its own perspective, but if you look into it, the India's IPO, OI, India Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, the critical difference is in 3 main areas, and this is particularly with regard to capacity building and resource sharing, which is also disaster risk reduction and management, which also resonates in Indonesia's GMF. But there is another angle which India is really keenly looking into, and That critical area is science and technology and academic cooperation. When you look into this interaction, when you grow the consciousness within the communities with regard to maritime affairs, with regard to maritime and marine sciences as such, it becomes very important that you inculcate that feeling within your communities, coastal communities, and other which are integrated into this maritime zones, to look it from a different point of view. Now, when you look into Indonesia's Global Maritime Fulcrum, I strongly believe that this component of science and technology and developing the marine science and developing the underwater resources should be also this GMF 2.0's agenda in future. Also, when you look into which one of those documents which have been released very recently, India ASEAN Action Plan 2021-2025, it clearly states that maritime connectivity, maritime security, HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, defense dialogues, and addressing issues related to maritime security and safety and freedom of navigation and overflight, as well as unimpeded commerce and resolution of disputes by peaceful means, should look into that domain where this outlook of these two regions, India and ASEAN, really synergize. In fact, when you look also into the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, it highlights the fact that maritime security and promoting dialogue and cooperation along with development and prosperity has been the underlying theme in this vision. India strongly believes that through the Sagar initiative, which is known as security and growth for all in the region, can develop potential areas for cooperation and development. While it is well known that Indonesia and its geographical expanse acts as a cradle to the larger Southeast Asia, it has become imperative, and we strongly believe in India, that it has become imperative for Indonesia to regain the critical economic and strategic space in the larger Indo-Pacific politics. In fact, your previous foreign minister, the then foreign minister of Indonesia, Marty Natalegawa, also had proposed this Indo-Pacific treaty, which outlined the need for cooperative security in the larger geographical region. But it was much before the time, and therefore the resonance and the response was not that much to his proposal as such. Now, when you look into this, what has been really outlined by Dr. Ibrahim, and when I superimpose into larger initiative which has been outlined by Prime Minister Modi related to Sagarmala, which means connecting ports, it acts as a chain of ports across India's coastal region. And Jokowi's administration pursued to develop new ports across Indonesia, including near about 19 ports and 8 additional ports, which this can be a one string which can connect all across, from India, from the west coast of India, right to the Sabang port of Indonesia as such. And this network can develop this larger economic complementarities and develop integrated infrastructure which can support the growth in the two countries as well as in the littoral countries along the Indian Ocean. Both the countries have been working on land infrastructure as well as ancillary ports which can support the hinterland. I would rather suggest that if you are very keen, look into the project reports that we have been really publishing on our shipping and land transport ministry, which outlines that how much work has been done with regard to certain projects, what has been the hindrances, where the fund allocation will be coming from. It is all in black and white. And the basic purpose is to bring in more digital, more science, more technology acumen into ports, port development, infrastructure, turnaround time where a ship really enters the port and how much time it takes to really ship it around, so that they save on the man days and also the labor which is really involved in unloading and loading as such. When you look into India, and it has looked into this port infrastructure, which is critical for civilian operations and also for naval operations, as well as providing HADR at times of crisis. This inland waterways is one where we have done excellent, because now with the inland waterways we have been transporting goods across those riverine areas as such, and this also has brought about more connectivity through different modes, and this has been much in the work in progress. Now, in the Global Maritime Fulcrum, we closely, since we do coordinated patrols with Indonesia, we do occasional exercises also. We have seen that in terms of developing Indonesian Navy, the budgetary support has not been very much, and which is slightly concern for us, because a stronger Indonesia acts to our benefit in countering piracy and other transnational crime, and also drugs trafficking in and across the Andaman Sea and closer to this Indonesian coast as such. Now, therefore, India, and if you look into this, our deliberations, our dialogue with Indonesian counterparts, we are definitely looking into Indonesia's, industry, shipping industry, as well as naval shipyards as such, to develop synergies, to develop platforms which can support the infrastructure as well as greater trade between the whole of the Asian region, and therefore it will be critical. Now, India also looks into development of the Sabang port, because and this increasing cooperation through the Defense Cooperation Agreement, which was signed in 2001. But as the topic itself says, this Global Maritime Fulcrum needs to move beyond and look into how it can interconnect with the different initiatives which have been undertaken by countries in the periphery of the Indian Ocean. One of the proposals which can really bring about synergies, and I strongly believe this should be one of the agendas which should be brought to the table, is that how the Asia and Africa can connect together, because we are basically resource rich, we are labor rich, we know how to develop skill base and all those things, and this will become a biggest arc from starting from eastern coast of Africa, going till the end of Indonesia, particularly the east of Java and beyond itself. And this resource impetus, which will be connected with different ports across the length and breadth of this coastal region itself. And because already we are working on Asia-Africa Growth Corridor along with Japan, in which many of the African countries are participants, I believe this fusion between the two will somehow create that necessary shipping load which is required from the point of view of Indonesia as well as India as such. People have known that Prime Minister Suga has undertaken the visit to Indonesia and Vietnam as part of its first foreign trip abroad, and it has become imperative that India, Japan, and Indonesia should work itself on development priorities and also look for areas of cooperation, particularly in the context of fourth industrial revolution, and connecting the dots. So why I'm stressing the fact is connecting the dots, particularly port infrastructure, starting from Eastern Africa through peninsular India, and thereafter connecting the important ports in Myanmar, Thailand, and Indonesia. In fact, all of these ports, there is synergies which is already existent between India and Japan, and this can further be looked into. This maritime link, when you look into this arc itself, would be critical in developing regional resilient supply chain and promote trade between the littoral countries of the Indian Ocean. And this will also act to Indonesia's advantage. And I put it more in a clearer perspective. When you look into this Indo-Pacific Economic Corridor, which is much in the blueprint mode, might provide much impetus for interlinking these ports and developing the necessary infrastructure. Also, if you look into Global Maritime Fulcrum, I strongly believe that developing digital economy and implementing digital resources and data in managing maritime trade and commerce will be critical for Indonesia to look into it. Let me propose that the three countries, India, Japan, and Indonesia, can commission a trilateral dialogue mechanisms which can look into different aspects related to economic growth, maritime security, pooling of resources, so as to achieve maximum benefits to the communities in the coastal region, as well as sharing the best practices among the three countries. I would rather call this the Universal Initiative between India, Indonesia, and Japan, which will connect the larger trade and maritime commerce initiatives in the Asian region. Now, while many European countries have started outlining their Indo-Pacific strategy and looking for potential, there is a need for revisiting the balance of trade and look into regional value chain across region supported by coastal port network. I completely agree with Dr. Ibrahim when he talks about the European code with regard to shipping, with regard to decommissioning of ships and all those things. And what we have seen in the last few years, that many of these European shipping companies have been using our lenient laws to flush out their tanks and destroy the coastal flora and fauna. And this has become a big problematic. India has witnessed a lot of them, and pollution itself on the coastal region itself is a critical issue. But this legal and procedural aspects from the point of view of freight cost and tariffs itself need to be worked into. And I believe these two countries can really work on this aspect. Many of the people have really asked me, and I would like to clear it, that when India has not joined RCEP, what exactly is the potential for India in the future? And I strongly believe that India will again come back to the drawing board and would negotiate bilateral arrangements with those countries which can provide a better, indigenous production, not with a name tag which is being changed from made in China to some other country as such, but complete rules of origin which country will adopt it will be critical. And this will also, India will look into country-specific tariff concession and procedural aspects which can very well be worked out. India, Indonesia, again, the littoral countries and other countries which are affected because of these shipping code and other legal aspects need to work on Asian shipping code and stringent laws on polluting ships, and also those ships which use certain provisions in the third world countries to draw benefits. I think the time has come for two aspects, both from the point of view of India and from the point of view of Indonesia's Global Maritime Fulcrum, that both these countries need to work on GMF and Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative 2.0 and work beyond 2025, that how we are going to see that maritime trade commerce and whether we need to hold hands with regard to capacity building and developing coastal security in such a way that the countries in the region, particularly in Indian Ocean and beyond itself, could benefit from that kind of initiative as such. I rest my case over here. Thank you very much. Over to you, Irfa.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Pankaj. Professor Pankaj has delivering a very insightful perspective from geopolitical perspective side, and he also emphasize the importance of port connectivity from Africa to Asia, and also to strengthening the cooperations between India, Indonesia, and Japan, and to push Indonesia to enlarge the budgets on coastal guards, and then to push Indonesia to do more effort to build a synergy with the actors in the area of Indo-Pacific region. So, ladies and gentlemen, Demas will send a formulaire, and then I hope you will be willing to provide a short time to fill the feedback, so we will be able to improve for our next seminars and discussion. And then we will have our third insight from Mas Joko Susanto. Mas Joko Susanto, are you ready? So, Mas Joko Susanto, the time is yours. Mas Joko?
Hello? Hello, Irfan.
Okay, yes.
Is my voice quite clear?
It's clear.
Okay. Thank you, Irfa. And also, good night, everybody. Before I continue into my presentation, please allow me to share my PPT. Okay, tonight I will share my thought on Indonesia's Global Maritime Fulcrums, to be specific in dealing with the limits, probably structural limits, provided by the distinct history of the doctrines. Before that, I will start by providing you with the way I. Okay, let's start from the fact that the fate of Indonesian global maritime fulcrums, according to my opinions, the doctrine is experiencing a downfall spirals into what we can describe it as from booming to bouncing. It is booming because when it was for the first time introduced by President Jokowi in Myanmar, everybody listens and also respond with a great interest. There are a lot of studies devoted to the doctrines, and also for Indonesian people, the doctrines also welcomed with a great interest. There are several policies, striking policies, following the doctrines, and there are many others euphoria behind the doctrines. But we now witnessing that the doctrines experiencing kind of a bouncing. There are several issues starting from, for example, the recent developments dealing with the corruption scandals involved in the Minister of Oceans and also Fishery. And there are also questions about the future of the global maritime itself, especially in the as implemented in diplomatic and also several issues after that. Okay. Why Indonesia's global maritime fulcrums experiencing the downfall spirals? To answer this, I will look into what we call as the lack of structural imperative behind of the initiatives. The structural initiative refers to what Alfred Mahan said. Mahan is a giant in the study of the maritime geopolitics, and he once said that a strong maritime policy finds its fundamental roots in the strong interest on a global economy and vice versa. It means to have a strong maritime policy, we should have in the beginning a strong interest on a global economy. The strong interest on a global economy is the best guarantee for the preservations and the continuations of the strong maritime policy. Conversely, the strong maritime policy will guarantee also the development of the strong interest in global economy. The Mahan idea is United States apply this Mahan's idea beautifully, and we can see United States transform from the state which is not really acknowledged as a sea power in the beginning of 19th century. It's now become in the 20th century, she's becoming one of the greatest sea power. Starting from these Mahan's propositions, we can look at the structural background when the Jokowi's maritime doctrines was initiated. And to look at into the data, we can, okay, this is the data. We can see from the charts that when Indonesia start to develop this kind of strong initiative in the maritime policy, the data, the economic, and also the share of export, as shown in the share of export of Indonesian economy, did not really support what the Mahan's propositions, what the Mahan propositions on the strong maritime policy. So there wasn't a kind of a strong economic interest on the global economy in Indonesia at that time. As we can see, Malaysia is much better in the share of export on the national economy compared to Indonesia. The question is, in the lack of these structural imperatives, why Indonesia managed to introduce a striking maritime doctrines such as Global Maritime Fulcrums? The answers provided by what we call as the sanctuary of the geopolitical imperative. So in the lack of the economic imperative, President Jokowi looked at President Jokowi start to develop a kind of new political drivers. There are many studies on the global maritime fulcrums, but not many people who put interest on its relationship between the doctrines into Indonesian Jokowi's interest on the middle power diplomacy. But if we look at into Jokowi's first term visions on foreign policy, we can see that basically there are 4 visions. The first one is to put into mainstream the Indonesian identity as an archipelagic state. It's quite traditional definition of presidential visions. And the second one is, it is a relatively new one, to strengthen Indonesian global role through the middle power diplomacy. And then the third one, to engage with the new mandala of the Indo-Pacific. And then the last one, to revitalize Indonesian diplomatic infrastructures. By these visions, the Global Maritime Fulcrum, even though we cannot find this term, I mean the Global Maritime Fulcrum, in the Jokowi's first presidential visions, but we can develop the context for these doctrines. It means the doctrines, the doctrine wasn't introduced in the vacuum of the discourse, but there are discursive structures. There is a discursive structures provided by several issues, like, for example, middle power diplomacy, and then also archipelago identity, new mandala of Indo-Pacific, and the diplomatic infrastructures. The red issues, archipelagic identity and diplomatic infrastructures, are quite classical in Indonesian maritime policy. But the yellow ones, it means middle power diplomacy and Indo-Pacific issue, is a kind of a new vocabularies in Indonesian maritime policy. So what happened is the reformulations of the idea on the posisi silang. This is a classical term on Indonesian geopolitics, which means that Indonesian locations in the crossroads also share some opportunity and challenge. in the past, basically there are two approaches in considering this posisi silang concept. The first one, we can call it as an inward-looking approach. And then the second one is the outward-looking approach. The inward-looking approach consider posisi silang as an inherent challenge rather than opportunities. In result, Southeast Asia is a crucial area. It's a strategic buffer rather than a stepping stones. In result, when we develop this inward-looking approach, we put more concern on the issues of national resilience rather than the issue of international leverage. Global Maritime Fulcrum is a change and a continuity of this approach. First of all, it is a reaction to the Suharto New Order Wawasan Nusantara. Totally different. Wawasan Nusantara is under Suharto regime. Suharto developed this concept into a kind of inward-looking approach. Even though Suharto shared the same concern on the Cold War geopolitics. But Global Maritime Fulcrum is considerably different because by concept, it is not developed under the inward-looking approach, but more outward-looking by concepts. To some extent, it shares Djuanda Declaration's confidence, even though Djuanda Declarations focus more on the national integrity and to some extent also domestic integrity, but it develops under the old order confidence, especially the Sukarno confidence, in developing what we call as a new world orders. So it is a part of the outward-looking approach. And also this outward-looking approach dedicated to respond the geopolitical situation at the time, which is characterized by the Cold War geopolitics. But Global Maritime Fulcrums developed in the different context. The Cold War is over, and there is a changing geopolitics, and there is a rising Sino and US rivalries. By this concept, Global Maritime Fulcrum is the strongest outward-looking approach on Indonesian posisi silang after the 1957 Djuanda Declarations. Before that, we don't have this kind of the strong and striking initiative which share this outward-looking approach as well as Djuanda Declarations confidence on these issues. Of course, there are some prelude from this. For example, the development of the introduction of the asset cabotage in 2005. But by and large, Poros Maritim or the Global Maritime Fulcrum is the strongest initiative who take the path of the Djuanda Declarations, not Wawasan Nusantara. But besides both shares similarities, there are also differences between Djuanda Declarations and Global Maritime Fulcrums. Both shares outward-looking approach, but there are different contexts, from Cold War to Sino-US rivalries, from new emerging forces to middle power diplomacy. From Asia-Africa nexus to Indo-Pacific nexus. The last three contexts is basically very different from the Djuanda Declaration context. We will talk a lot about this middle power diplomacy and this new context later. But developing a maritime policy based on this new geopolitical imperative, to some extent, is not easy in Indonesia at the time, especially when Jokowi start their first term presidency, because there are some what we call as a geopolitical, the limit of geopolitical imperative, especially when we refer to the Indonesian positions in foreign policy at the time. Before Jokowi's presidency, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono era, or President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono developed a different kind of approach. To some extent, Jokowi is an antithesis from SBY approach. And based on this context, there is a problem when Jokowi tried to develop this kind of maritime policy based on the geopolitical imperative, because there are different points of view, and also there are some limited modalities to start what we call as a middle power politics. In this point, we talk about the poor infrastructure for middle power politics. Why middle power politics, not geopolitical imperative as a whole? Because middle power politics is a crucial concept behind of the introduction of the Global Maritime Fulcrum. But not many researchers put their interest on this issue. But to develop a middle power politics, there are some limitations. In fact, Indonesia is not really an emerging country by substantive terms. For example, we prefer to call Indonesia as a big boy at the crossroads. The crossroads at the posisi silang. It's a big boy, probably the fat boy at the crossroads. Of course, there are the rising Indonesian prominence, as we can see from Indonesian memberships in the G20, and also the risings from Indonesian prominence in the several issues or several aspects. But it's all about the prominence, not really about the performance. If we talk about the performance, there are some significant gap. If we talk about Indonesia, for example, in comparisons to the big countries, and also their approach, sometimes in foreign policy totally different. There is also limited purposes and traditions. Under SBY, SBY defines Indonesian foreign policy not in the emerging country cards. SBY try to avoid using these cards. SBY prefer to use a regional card rather than these emerging power cards. So it is very much close to the Suharto approach rather than Sukarno approach. Sukarno approach is close to what we call as an emancipative global role rather than Suharto approach on carefully managed regional policy. SBY to some extent is the continuations of Suharto approach on the carefully managed regional policy. It puts more attentions on the regional aspects, regional leaderships, on the ASEANs as everything about ASEANs, not as a stepping stone, but as a cornerstone. Even all Indonesian foreign policy will be centralized on the ASEAN, for example.
Sorry, Mas Joko, time's up.
Oh. Can I have 5 or 10 minutes more, Irfan? Because yeah, please.
Probably less than 5. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Less than 5.
I'll make it quick. So, and then by concept, Indonesian foreign policy based on the soft revisionism, it's very difficult to develop a kind of emerging or middle power politics. And in order to overcome the limits, Jokowi tried to make some adaptation. For example, at the beginning, this doctrine was introduced as a global maritime axis, not a fulcrum. But after that, there is a kind of shift from axis to fulcrums. Axis and fulcrum is a different concept. Axis is more centralized, axis is more crucial in terms of geostrategic concepts, and the fulcrum is more periphery rather than the axis. So the shift from axis and into the fulcrums, we can talk more about this. It means that there is a kind of recalculations that Indonesian modality is not really enough to support this kind of axis-based maritime doctrines. So there is also another shift, the shift from the geopolitical imperative to connectivity focus. We can see from the development from 5 pillars into 7 pillars. It's all about the connectivity. But, and it is also the development after that, the Asian outlook is trying to fulfill the missing links between the Asian's regional policy, regional outlook developed by SBY in the previous era into the new geopolitical imperative provided by the Global Maritime Fulcrums. But there is still a coming challenge and opportunity. The first one is the persisting trends. Indonesia's economic is failed to provide a better structural imperative to the Indonesian maritime policy, because, for example, if we look from the data, the contributor of Indonesian foreign reserve is tourism. Tourism is an in situ process. This is not an export-based economy, which can provide a better platform to develop a strong maritime economy, a strong maritime policy. And on the other hand, the contribution of the blue economy is still minor by overall. As we can see, the contribution of fishery sectors is about 2%, below 3%. It's quite minor. And then, but there is new development. Visi Indonesia Maju or Indonesia Onwards. It can be a new opportunity to fulfill the missing link provided, the missing link that Jokowi has in the first terms. And then the focus of the second terms to catch up, to provide a better economic scaling up. But by this point, there are some coming tasks to the future. The first one, to put the new apples into the baskets. There is still a lax. There is still a missing link between Jokowi's concept on Indonesia Maju and his idea on the global maritime fulcrums. And then also, we need to focusing more on the revitalizing fundamental structures. It means if we want to develop a strong maritime policy, we should develop also our interest on the global economy. It means also the shares of our exports in our national economy should be increased in the future. And global maritime fulcrum should be consolidated into the what we call as a blue economic scaling up policy. It means not only talking about the geopolitical imperatives, but also to how to develop it into the real and also practical economic scaling up, which can guarantee a better share of national share of our export in our national GNP. That's all, Eva. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mas Joko, for very insightful presentations. We have very distinguished presenters, speakers. We also, among friends here, I noticed that the colleagues from Universitas Sudirman is attending our forum, and from Universitas Veteran is also attend. Probo and friends, Probo Khalifatus and friends, thank you for coming. And we have also a very enthusiastic audience, because as we can see from the group chats, we already have questions queuing. So the first question. So the first question will be from Probo Darono Yakti, and then Muammar Alif, and then Haikal. So Probo, you may speak. You may deliver your question right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. My name is Probo Darono Yakti. I'm an IR lecturer in UPN Veteran Jawa Timur, as well as a doctoral student in FISIP Airlangga. I would like to thank Mbak Irva for inviting us to join this session. Thank you all speakers that provided us with a holistic point of view about GMF. My first question goes to Mas Ibrahim. As we know, Indonesia had already developed the sea toll program, as well as provided a lot of ro-ro boats. How's your outlook regarding Indonesia administration, which targeting to leap forward as advanced economics? Where's the significance of the GMF and sea toll program regarding to your point of view in a shipping company? And then second one is for Prof. Pankaj. From your point of view, where's India position to secure its interest in Indonesia, while the US and China still compete in the South China Sea? And the third one and last, to my college and also my excellent bachelor thesis advisor, Mas Joko, as I had already wrote under your guidance, I didn't see any of progress in GMF itself, except my point of view that it is only a lip service from Jokowi to raise a leverage to defeat Mr. Prabowo in presidential election. I really agree that it is not booming at all, but bouncing. Moreover, it is just floating because there are no significant commitment while Jokowi running its his second term. There are no such of continuity in his vision with Ma'ruf Amin. It was more pragmatic vision rather than comprehend the doctrine. So, how's your opinion regarding this second term of Jokowi's presidency, as the regional situation, especially in South China Sea, getting pretty tense? Are there any effort to separate the Indonesia Maju vision and also the GMF? Okay, that's all. Thank you, Mbak Irva.
Thank you, Probo, for the questions. And second question from Muammar Alif. Will you unmute and speak up your question?
Thank you, Mbak Irva, for the chance of me giving the question, and also thank you for the honorable speakers for your insights in this discussion. My question is just one, but I want a professional opinion from Mr. Ibrahim, Professor Pankaj, and Sir Joko Susanto. I noticed that during the discussion, the primary language and the focus both in economics and the geopolitical consideration regarding Indonesia's role as well as its regional response was centered around Indo-Pacific area, which means that it implies that it focuses both on the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. But if we see the trends, there are disproportionate focus on Pacific Ocean, which is warranted because the majority of the global trade is go past through the Pacific Ocean, but it also shows an underrepresentation and underserved attention towards the Indian Ocean. I noticed the fact that despite the failings of Indonesia's Global Maritime Fulcrum policy in Jokowi's second term, the silver lining from his first term was the establishment of the Indonesian Ocean Rim Association, which effectively is a cooperation between states around Indian Ocean, and one of their goals is to promote and to promote and intensify the trade and the cooperation between governments, so that it would serve better from their naval economic perspective. In my question is, do and this is a concern raised by Mr. Ibrahim as well. I saw that there is an oligopoly in the shipping industry, in the global shipping industry, especially by the trade alliances. My question is, would a perhaps, and this is, pardon me if I sound preposterous, would a novel solution like an international or perhaps intergovernmental merchant marine between IRA states would prove a sufficient answer towards the breaking the oligopoly, and thus uh, also pushing perhaps pushing for a greater initiative and greater urgency for states in the in the Indian Ocean to step up their naval and maritime game, because learning from the past experiences like the British Navy and the current American Navy, their merchant marine is the driving force of their in their maritime capabilities, and it's also the source of their current economic prosperity. So let's say if the states in the IRA organization develops an international merchant marine or merchant navy, would it work? In your professional opinion, for Mr. Ibrahim, Professor Pankaj, and Sir Joko Susanto. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muhammad Ali, for the very quality of questions. And we also have questions from Haikal because he unable to use his microphone, so he write his questions through group chats. He asks, many discussion and articulations on GMF usually revolve around the economic aspect. However, the security part of GMF most of the time took a backseat in the discussion. Really? According to Ivan Laksmana of CSIS Jakarta, the cause of this was due to President Jokowi leave the maritime security and defense on autopilot to his mostly retired Army General Advisor. Really? Therefore, I would like to ask, is the Army-centric nature of Indonesia defense and security policy making is indeed a detrimental factor in Indonesian maritime policy in general, and whether there are any other factors that hinder the making of a robust maritime outlook and policy for Indonesia. Okay, so we will gather these three questions and then we will hear the answer from the speakers, and then we will collect another question. So please be patient, Harfana, to wait for the other session. Okay. So who's going to answer first? Probably Dr. Ibra, will you be answering the first questions from Probo and then from Alif and Haikal, or probably Professor Pakaja?
I can start
or Mas Joko?
myself, if you wish.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I have three questions on my my notes. Toll out program, and then the Indo-Pacific routes. The questions asking about the question tries to clarify why was the focus revolving around Indo-Pacific, whereas Pacific Oceans were not really much discussed. And then what would be the solution for global oligopoly? Is there any global greater initiatives for this? And then the autopilot in the maritime sector. Okay, toll out program. To me, toll out program is, you know, it is better than late. So of course, it's not the most ideal one. A study by LPM FAUE has you know, signaled that toll out program has not been achieving the target as such the government was wanting to achieve. So, for instance, inflation targeting, mitigation of supply chain, and then proper growth, growth equality, for instance. It didn't really reach by the program. The program is like, I don't know how to translate in English, yes, angat-angat tay ayam gitu ya. I don't know how to translate it. So the first step, the first stage was really kind of a militant policy, like the whole efforts and spirits were all devoted for the program. But afterwards, the second term of Pak Jokowi, it's almost neglected. Of course, there are still here and there, but of course, it doesn't really solve the problem of inflation, for instance. And there are many reasons. If you remember the channeling of supply chain I mentioned in my presentations, the ocean freight in Indonesia is about, on average, it's about 12% until 30% of the whole cost. So you are dealing with the whole chain of transportations, but you are assuming that when you solve the problem in the ocean transportations, you are expecting that whole problem disappear, which is, of course, not as easy as that. When you are not able to, mitigate the problem in inland, warehousing, and port, then actually you are only limiting your medicine on one particular area. For instance, you have been able to reach the final port with 20% effectiveness. And then you forgot that the whole tracking in, let's say, in Kalimantan is monopolized by, let's say, Haji Saman or Koh Afung, for instance. So the whole efficiency disappeared. And that's why Pak Jokowi once mentioned that tollat program is actually enjoyed, the margin is actually enjoyed by the oligopolies within the channel of either warehousing, either inland transport. So it is like we are assuming that tollout is the for the whole disease, but we forgot that Indonesia is requiring multi transportation vehicles. You cannot rely on solving tollout, and you are expecting the whole problem is disappear. Well, the domestic routes in itself has been quite efficient compared to 5-10 years back, but it doesn't solve the problem, as sea freight is only one segment among 7 to 8 segments in the whole supply chain. Indo-Pacific and Ocean region, Indo-Pacific routes, I can share you something, as we are always updating the data from Bloomberg. So if you see here that the whole volume of cargo by August 2020, you can see here that it is true, Asia, North America has been pretty much leading by about 2,000 box, 2 million box. So transportation, the number of containers from Asia to United States, North America has been about 2 million box. It's just 30% less than intra-Asia. So however, the nature on that particular routes, Asia, North America is very different to intra-regional route in Asia. So intra-regional routes between Indonesia, India, Vietnam, and then Thailand, Indonesia is more reflecting. It's more reflecting the endowment, the self-generating cargo within the region. Whereas Asia, North America to Asia is more advanced product. It's not very much affecting what we can produce domestically in Indonesia. Yeah, it's here and there. That's true, especially during the Trump era. Trump era is actually more beneficial for some Indonesian products. Let's say textile, clothes, we are more competitive than Vietnam due to abolishing specific regulation, specific agreement between Indonesia and United States and Vietnam, for instance. So to me as a researcher in this topic, in this area, I don't really see that Asia, North America is super relevant than the whole within Asia. So that probably in my data, I'm more focusing in intra-Asia as this is about 70% of the whole trade flows and more relevant for Indonesian commodities. Then solution oligopoly. Yeah, it's very good questions. If we know that, if you realize that the problem in the market is pretty much the domination of three main players, the main alliance, how should we react? Yeah, the problem is that there is no easy way to resolve the problem. So for instance, in this current situation, when we find difficulties in sending goods, limited space, limited, in increasing freight rate, in many occasions, last week I was invited by Minister of Trade. We identify that this problem is among rare occasions where government has very little space to work on. It's all about market mechanism. It's all about the demand and supply. I mean, you cannot, for instance, force Costco to add, more deployment of vessel. Don't forget my first slide. While we are assuming Indonesia is really big, our cargo is just 14 million. Yeah, just half of Singapore. Even though Singapore is transshipment hub. So it's not, it's not big appetite for global market to enter to Indonesia unless we can aggregate the whole cargo together into specific direction. For instance, we aggregate the whole cargo for Africa and we can end up with really big cargo. Otherwise, 1 million, 2 million, whereas the capacity is, 15 million is tiny margin that global operator will not be that interested in solving the problem regarding the oligopoly. And then the last questions, well, I totally agree. Of course, yeah, please, I'm talking myself. Yeah, I'm not representing Samudra, for instance, to respond on these questions. If I were Pak Luhut, I will really dedicate myself on this maritime problem, knowing that I have a lot of power. So instead of I'm becoming investment minister and then PJS health minister and then PJS another minister, then another PJS, another minister, we thought really bring a big legacy, great legacy for the country. I think if I were Pak Luhut, I will be really concentrating on maritime because in itself, it needs a lot of efforts to mitigate, a lot of efforts. Talking about banking, talking about exporters, talking about traders. You know what? A lot of our products are actually channeled by traders in Singapore. Ya, kenapa kita nggak efisien? Karena barangnya semuanya di trading oleh Singaporeans. So that the value added at the level of petani, pengrajin is extremely low. Because everything is gathered by traders. Those Singaporean who can manage the trading between Indonesia and outside Indonesia, as they have all channel, they have all financing, they have everything channeling our product from Indonesia to the rest of the world, to the global market. So in itself, it has been really big thing. If Pak Luhut wants to concentrate, wants to have big legacies on this country, I would say being a true maritime minister who can solve the whole sophisticated, it's the maritime industry in itself has been really sophisticated. It needs somebody like Pak Luhut who can, navigate, orchestrating the whole stakeholders. Whereas as for now, Pak Luhut is diverging towards many things gitu ya. And I exactly echo what you mentioned that because of autopilot, it's going nowhere. It's going pretty much nowhere. Like all of a sudden we build port, all of a sudden the port becomes sunk cost. I'm talking about Kuala Tanjung, for instance. The building process of Kuala Tanjung for me is like you are building port in 800. You are assuming the port will be operating when you build the port. Yeah. Whereas modern port industry is not that way. You have to really make sure who will be using the port first before you build the port. So that strategy leaving us, a lot of opportunity cost as the port is running below the capacity, below the optimum capacity that it could have served. Should we be able to forecast who are using the port, the infrastructure. So that is Mbak Irfa, my comments. I hope it is answering the whole question. Let me know.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ibra. And Professor Pankajya, will you answer the questions? Yeah.
Okay. With regard to the first question asked by Prabhu, where is India placed with regard to US-China competition in SCS? I believe India has maintained that there should be a freedom of navigation and rightful, exploitation of resources which lie within the exclusive economic zone of each country. We strongly support Indonesia, particularly with regard to encroachments that China has made in the Natuna Islands and their maritime militia. But we are very clearly and very concerned with regard to the code of conduct with regard to South China Sea, because we believe that the ASEAN countries, particularly the claimant countries, should come together and put some pressure on China with regard to accepting these terms in terms of protocols, in terms of standard operating procedures, and that will be critical for maintaining peace and security. Since we are still one of those countries which a large amount of trade passes through this zone, so we are concerned that the peace and stability and security of this region is very critical for our interest as such. The second question which has been asked by Muammar with regard to Indo-Pacific and Indian Ocean, I believe that India looks into Indo-Pacific as an extension of Indian Ocean, which means Indian Ocean extends to this Pacific Oceans and thereby connect itself. I don't think India has stressed too much on Pacific orientation because we are not a member of Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, which connects Asia and Pacific together as such, and we are more focused on Indian Ocean, how we can work toward it. The other aspect which he asked about, that whether there can be intergovernmental collaboration in shipping and merchant navy per se as such. Our experience that has been that when we started a joint shipping company between India and Iran, this company suffered huge losses because of sanctions on Iran. Now that kind of a very nascent company which comes up, it is critical that it can really withstand these fluctuations, market fluctuations, as well as these issues which come up in geopolitics every now and then. The last question which has been asked by Hekal, even though it was not pointed to me, but let me tell you one very basic thing. We also were facing these issues with regard to this requirements from different three wings, army, because army is very predominant in Indian military setup also. But then we accepted that there is need for a chief of defense staff, which should bring these three wings together, and we should work on joint warfare, where if there is some procurement, it should be of utility for the other forces also. In this regard, the one milestone which have been achieved, that we instituted a committee which was known as Defense Planning Committee, which included serving generals, the National Security Advisor, and few of the bureaucrats, so that we can plan it 10 and 20 years ahead of what exactly could be our requirements following into depreciation and when we want to phase out certain equipment. I believe this can be also emulated in the context of Indonesia, and it has been very helpful for us, and we are working out for our planning, our capacities for the next 20 or 30 years as such. Thank you, Irfan.
Thank you for your answer, Professor Pankajya. And I'm sorry for Harfana. I don't think we will have enough time to have another question. So the answers for Mas Joko will be the ending of the of this session. But please, you may join us with CSGS webinar or discussions again. So, and we will have to have a discussion, to have a virtual discussion. So please, Mas Joko, you may use the floor. You may use the Zoom.
Okay. I'm sorry, I left the chat for a while. Is there any specific question for me, Mbak Irfa?
Yes, Oh, yes, yes. I will read the questions for you. From Probo. Probo questions for you is, are there any effort to separate the Indonesia Maju Vision and the GMF? Because Prabowo noticed the abandoning of GMF in the Jokowi second terms. From Probo, and from Alif, it was about oligopoly in the shipping industry. And the last question from Haikal, we can see it from group chat. It's about the the question I would like to ask is the army-centric nature of Indonesia's defense and security policy making is indeed a detrimental factor in Indonesia's maritime policy in general, and whether there are any other factors that hinder the making of robust maritime outlook and policy for Indonesia?
Okay, I think I agree with Alif, but not in terms of detrimental uh, uh, sense. For example, the Indonesian army centrics to some extent give a bad influence, but not in terms of detrimentals, but it has provide some limits. For example, there are two options to develop maritime policy. For the first one, for example, in terms of Mahanian's approach, or maybe other Corbett's and other approach. What we need is not a Mahanian approach, but considering the fact that army-centric centrality in Indonesian's maritime policy, it can provide us with that kind of limits. So there is a kind of, for example, tendency to develop this kind of Mahanian approach. But in fact, our modality is not enough to support or to provide this kind of Mahanian approach. And the first one, the questions raised by Probo is also interesting about the connection between Indonesia Maju and the GMF. Until now, there is no clear connection from, the connections as explained by Jokowi itself and also his team in dealing with the relationship between Indonesia Maju concept and the GMF concept. There is a missing link, a terrible missing link between these two concepts. We need close connections. We need a close connectivity between GMF and also Indonesia Maju concept. As we can see from my presentations, to some extent, the connectivity approach as a new adjustment developed by Jokowi presidency, considering the limit provided by the structural aspects, as I mentioned in my presentations. And then his answer is to develop the connectivity approach. But this connectivity approach, without a clear concept to combine with the scaling up, economic scaling up approach, will result in this disconnection. For example, we dream a big influence of blue economy in national economy, but in fact, the shares of our the share of the blue economy in our national economy is still narrow, still minor until now. So the task in the future, how to combine, how to integrate the GMF doctrines and also into the Indonesian Maju concept, or to integrate Indonesian Maju concept into the dreams trying to pursue by the GMFs. This is a problem. It is a classical problem, how to combine. There are many doctrines, many good ideas, many good issues into one basket. And until now, we haven't seen yet that President Jokowi and his teams has provided a clear-cut explanation or clear-cut connections between not only Indonesian maritime visions, but also middle power politics, but also Indo-Pacific concepts, and also GMF. There are many issues, and all of these issues are separated each other, kind of a discrete and isolated concept rather than one integrated approach in developing not only Indonesian maritime policy, but also Indonesia's blue economy. Thank you, Irfa.
Thank you, Mas Joko. And now we will have short concluding remarks from each speakers. Less than 5 minutes concluding remarks, probably policy recommendations or insight on this discussion. First concluding remarks, Dr. Ibra, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mbak Irfa. I think the problem concerning problem, challenge, and opportunities at the same time in the maritime industry should be well addressed by stakeholders. Well, not only government but also private sectors in this area as well. And the deep thought on the sophistication of the problem may be needed to avoid a populist decision without taking into account the long-term impacts. For instance, India has decided not to join RCEP last time, by waiting that they have been experiencing current account deficit over the years with all RCEP countries. Correct me if I'm wrong, Prof. And that is the basic reason why should we join RCEP if we are not ready yet. Indonesia has much less a window to avoid RCEP because it is part of ASEAN commitment. So it's different to the case of India. But then, in many cases, we are entering in particular time without really preparing ourselves in that fight. So like we are entering Olympic Games without warming up, for instance. So that is the first aspect that we have to really understand what's going on. We have to forecast what's going on. And then the shipping industry, the transportation industry will be the backup, will be the supporters to promote lower logistic costs, more efficiency, more efficient transport expenses to bring goods and to bring goods and commodities to all over Indonesia. So in one way, the trade policies should be good, transportation as the backup should be efficient, and if we realize those two concepts together, then I think we should be able to continue the spirit of Djuanda, not only to connect Indonesia in more abstract way, but more in real way, that we are really connected with efficient and professional transportation industry. Back to you, Mbak Irfa.
Thank you for your crisp concluding remarks, Dr. Ibra. Now, Professor Palkaja, please, time is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Irfa. With regard to looking into these aspects of Global Maritime Fulcrum, how we can develop our shipping industries, I believe there is a lot to share between India and Indonesia, particularly with regard to budget management, particularly with regard to outcome reports. I somewhere feel that we need to work on an outcome basis, that if this is 1 year, then how much budget has been planned, how much projects have been completed, what exactly have been the problems in completion of the projects. If we do it in a very mission mode, then I believe Indonesia will be also able to generate sufficient resources, sufficient budgets, and emerge as truly the Global Maritime Fulcrum, because it has all kinds of wherewithal, the population, the resources, and the capacities which are existent. And I believe more interaction in this maritime domain, particularly working on digital, particularly working on bringing in efficiency, will be doing a lot good for both India and Indonesia. And that's all I have to say. And thank you, because I have to rush to somewhere. So I will leave slightly early if you don't mind. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Professor
Okay.
Apakacha.
Sure.
Okay,
Thank you.
see
Thank
you
you,
again.
Mike. Okay, see you. Bye-bye.
Yes, Mas Joko Susanto, now the time is yours. Mas
Okay.
Joko.
Okay. After all, to be an axis, you need you need not only in a good prominence but also in a good performance. But if you don't have both, if you only have one of them, maybe you can start from the fulcrums. So we are talking about the fulcrums. When when we start from the fulcrum, we can start from the prominence and we can develop the performance. The fulcrums works only if we have a good leverage on the subjects. And one of the way to develop our good leverage is how to develop our performance in blue economy. So it is our task to develop the contributions, the performance of our blue economy in order to support our GMF, our fulcrums. Not only as a fulcrum, we can hope in the future it's also an axis, as initially conceptualized by the founders of Global Maritime Fulcrum. So this is my wish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for speakers. Thank you for all the supporting team, and thank you for the attendee that willing to participate until very late at night. And we wish you to come to join again to CSGS discussion, and see you again in the next discussion. Bye.
Thank you, Irfa. Also, everybody.